Megan wants me to highlight that we are switching our newsletter platform. So we're going to be using a new kind of software moving forward to send out our newsletter every month. So if you're not signed up for our newsletter yet, she's asking to make sure that people get signed up so that you get transferred over to the new setup properly. If you are currently signed up, you shouldn't have to do anything. It should be fine.
How do you do that?
You sign up, there are links all over our website to like sign up for the newsletter. So, all right. Yeah. All good, Megan? All right. Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to move to our annual board vote. And so I'm going to officially call a membership meeting to order. And then from here, we're going to kind of follow the Robert's Rules of Order. Okay. So the way that our board elections work is we have a nominating committee and people put their names forward. We've been making announcements for the last couple months about whether people would like to join the board. And then we share a slate out previously at our November meeting and then at our in our newsletter. And so I'm going to share that slate. You guys don't want to see that. You want to see this. I know that's probably hard for people to read. But this is the board slate. Our all terms are for 1 year. So it would be from January to December 2025, except for the president position. That is a 2-year term. And so I would be entering my 2nd year of that 2-year term. And then, as you can see, all of the other board members are folks who are currently on the board. They've served for a variety of different number of years, except for Kevin, who I embarrassed last time by telling us a little bit about why he wanted to join the board. But we're excited to have him put his name forward. Any questions about this slate? Does everyone on this list accept their nomination? You have to speak now or hold your peace. Okay. Well, then if everyone accepts this nomination, then what we would need to do is someone will need to make a motion to vote on this slate and have that motion second. Does anyone want to put forward a motion to vote on this slate? We have a first. Second from Mark. All right. Any discussion? Probably look online. Okay. Then I'm going to call a vote. The motion on the floor is to accept this board slate as written. All in favor, either raise your hand, or if you're online, you can indicate your vote in the chat. All right. Any objections? All right, that motion passes then. So this will be our 2025 Wake Audubon board. That's exciting. All right, and then I have to have someone also formally motion to adjourn this short member meeting. Does anyone want to motion to adjourn?
Yes, word or two first.
Yes, go ahead.
I noticed that there's somebody missing on the board slate there, and that's the treasurer. We probably need somebody to step up and serve as treasurer. This is an important job. And, you know, somebody's got to be able to write the checks and, we got the annual report. Basement needs a treasurer. And, you know, this is getting pretty desperate at this point. Really, you know, we gotta have a treasurer. There's want to keep the book source. And so. We've been trying to figure out ways to do that, get one, you know, find a treasurer, but I don't know if we have any great ideas. We just need something, we really need somebody to volunteer to do that. So if somebody will step up.
Eric, I really appreciate that. It is a difficult position to fill, and Michi's been doing it for a couple years now, and it's ready to hand it off. So this board will, you know, handle the responsibilities now, but we really do need someone who's in the position. If you have good ideas or thoughts about someone who'd be interested. One of the nice things about the treasurer position is it's pretty predictable, meaning, you know, you kind of know what the cycle of things are going to be and that sort of thing. So it's good for someone who doesn't mind some computer work at a couple of board meetings. You don't have to do any event planning or, you know what that bird sounds like that from 200 yards away or anything like that. So it's pretty good. Any other questions? Okay. All right, well then with that, I want to invite Brian up here to get our, oh. See?
I'll move the adjourn. And thanks to the people who are leaving the board here this year.
You know, that is a good point. We should take a minute to recognize that. We have quite a few board members who are stepping off. Mary, who was our president, and our past president, Ann Miller, who is also in the room with us tonight. Susan, yes. And Michi, who's been our treasurer. So Susan in particular has been helping to lead our equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging work over the last few years. Help get that committee up and running, and continues to push us on that. And Michi's been our treasurer, and Ann is the one who makes sure that we have all kinds of great things in the back of the room every week, and has also been doing a lot of work with a school that's a partner of ours, Lincoln Heights, as well as thinking about what's happening down in the Fuquay Arena area and making sure we're not missing the boat there. So thank you all for your leadership on. All right, now we have a motion to close. Yes.
I move that we adjourn the official board election of the board meeting.
And we need a second.
I second.
All in favor, raise your hands. All right, there we go. All right, now we're ready for you, Brian.
Way to dim the lights.
Over the screen.
Yeah, overbeat. What do you think? Just trying to lower the thickness. So you want to go to.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Is that, yeah, I know what is that? Good for us. Oh, click on here, maybe, oh, expand it. And there. It's voices. See, sure it is not turned on. That again. Down at the bottom. Green bars, I can see share. Maybe like that kind of else and see what it's up. Maybe go to you. Slideshow. Pretty long. You want to go to regular view, is that which one? I want to get presenter. Get to the Christmas first. It's in the slideshow. Go back to the PowerPoint. Go back to the PowerPoint. Go back to PowerPoint. There's a thing down here. I can't get to the full window. I don't know why. Can you pull it up? See, it's like it's down there and I can't get there. Make it a window. It's a little noodle. This is like on the front. Don't worry about it. No, that's all. Gotcha. Now, but what I want to do is it's a different meeting. This is okay. This is totally fine. So we have some issue. That's should be able to out of looks right on maybe more complicated than I thought. Glad I brought my PowerPoint. Are you ready?
Everybody, I think we got it all set up.
Yeah, don't touch it, not touch it. I don't even want to touch it. Okay. Thank you all for coming. I am Brian O'Shea. I work here at the museum. I work with John, who is, in case you don't know, is doing well. I think he's supposed to go home today. At least that's what I said. John, maybe he's even watching, I don't know. Yeah, he bounced back yet again. Amazing guy. I wanted to talk a bit about the Christmas count. I'm the compiler of the Raleigh count. I've been the compiler since 2018, took over from John Connors. And just tonight, I'm not going to talk for too long. I just wanted to go through a brief history of the count, just explain what it is for people maybe either here or at home who don't know what the count is, don't know what the history of it is. And then talk a bit about the Raleigh count itself and just some of the changes we've seen over the years with the Raleigh count, or not we, but everyone who has participated in it. Preemptively, I want to thank John Connors and Harry LeGrand for giving me a lot of really valuable info about the old years of the count. Harry's been doing this count since like 1965. So both of them were really instrumental in telling me about the way things used to be and like some of the places that used to exist that are no longer around. It was really informative, and I honestly wish I had a lot more time to prepare this talk, because I would probably try to go into a lot more detail, sleuthing out old photos and things like that. The Christmas count coming up will be the 125th. That won't be Raleigh's 125th, but it is a very, very long running project. And I'm gonna technical glitch number one. Are you serious? Hold on, yes. There we go. Okay, figured it out.
The people online are saying they can't see the speaker, but
They can't see me?
yeah.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so. They can, okay, good. So what is the Christmas count? Well, the Christmas count is a 2-week event, based, well, it's actually 3 weeks, I believe, that extends from about 10 days before Christmas to about 10 days after. And it is coordinated by National Audubon. And it has the distinction of being the longest running citizen science program in North America. It is has been going on since 1900, and it is now in its 125th year. It started in the United States and a couple of counts in Canada, and it has since spread really all over, all the way out into the Pacific, all the way down to the bottom of South America, and all the way up into that's in the Arctic Circle. It's pretty close if it's not, but it's really kind of blanketed the country with count circles, and it's pretty impressive feat. Just to give you an idea of how much data is collected by the Christmas count, last year there were 2,677 counts, including over 2,000 in the US alone. Over 83,000 participants, and both the number of counts and the number of participants was a record high. And 2,380 species, that's over a fifth of all the bird species in the world, recorded on the Christmas count, one or another Christmas count, and almost 41 million individual birds. The highest number of species, I think there's a count in Ecuador that had something like 530 species recorded on a single count. The highest number in the United States is almost always Matagorda, Mad Island Marsh in Texas, on the coast of Texas. And they usually get about 230 to 250 species. I had the privilege of doing that count one year. It was really fun. All right. But by and large, in addition to generating data that's useful for conservation, it's also just a really good event for publicizing birding and promoting it. And that is Susan Campbell in silhouette there on the right, or sorry, on the left side there. And then here's our, I don't know what year this photo is taken, but it's too hilarious not to share it. I think this photo is probably from like 10 years ago or so. I'm in it, kind of next to Edward there, kind of toward the back on the right. And then a lot of these guys have long since moved on from here, but it's kind of fun to see. What's that? Yeah, so there's that was at our annual midday tally that we do for the Raleigh count, which we apparently, as John informed me today, we are going to do this year. There was some uncertainty about it, so I will be sending out a notice about that. But the Christmas count really does get a lot of coverage. It's always gotten a lot of media coverage. It's just a really before the internet, before social media, there was a lot of things like this really got people's attention and they would, have newspaper articles written about them. It wasn't always like this though. The origin of the Christmas count, is a little darker. Toward the end of the Victorian era, so toward the end of the 19th century, this was a Christmas tradition, was basically to go out and shoot stuff. And a lot of people know that, have a vague awareness that that happened, and that was the origin of the Christmas count. But this was a highly organized and very popular activity. It was called a side hunt. And what would happen is these groups of people, they would call them sides, would go out and hie them to the fields and on a cheerful mission of killing practically everything they saw. And then they would take them home, and then they would, weigh or count the number of animals they killed, and they would submit their haul to a sportsman's journal, and then there would be all kinds of accolades about these guys killing all this stuff. And that was during the Victorian era. So that was, for the most part, the second half of the 19th century. The Lacey Act, which forbid, transporting or selling for commercial gain of, certain animal species, hadn't really gotten into effect. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918, which essentially protected all species of birds, was almost 20 years, more than 20 years away. And at that time, this is a pretty rough time for wildlife in North America. Market hunting was common, so birds were shot, killed by the trolley carload to be sold in markets in coastal cities. The frontier was closed, so by that point, people had pushed all the way to the West Coast, wreaking ecological havoc in general. And around that time also, this was when a lot of bird species, among them Carolina parakeet, passenger pigeon, and ivory-billed woodpecker, functionally went extinct. Their populations crashed to the point that they would really never recover. Ivory bills held out a little longer than the other two, but this was when the populations really were known to experience their steepest declines. And on top of that, the well-known millinery trade in feathers was raging. So I think Frank Chapman walked down the streets of Manhattan and saw something like 500 people with various birds and bird parts in their hats. This is a very popular ladies' fashion at the time. So this is widely accepted. Wildlife was kind of thought of as this inexhaustible resource, but there were a few farsighted people who kind of saw this and thought, there has to be a better way. Game populations are dwindling. We need to do something about this. And one of the main people in that was Frank Chapman. And I'm a museum guy, so I'm very well acquainted with Frank Chapman. He was a curator at the American Museum. He is the preeminent authority on the birds of Columbia. His monograph on birds of Columbia, published in 1917, is one of these classic tomes of neotropical ornithology. He was a tireless collector of birds, but also he was a field guide illustrator. So before Peterson came along, Chapman was doing his own work, illustrating birds, photographing birds. He's one of the real pioneers in that. And something I didn't know was that, I use the word inventing kind of loosely here, but he was one of the key people to try to lure people to museums by creating habitat dioramas, the kinds of dioramas that you see everywhere now. That is a common practice. That's kind of the standard. If you go here, you'll see it. But he was the one who really, advocated for displaying animals not as rows of stuffed specimens, but as lifelike forms in their actual habitat. So Chapman really knew, he was really sort of ahead of his time in terms of museum skills and museum management and museum. He was just a consummate curator and natural history buff. Bird Lore magazine he started became the forerunner to Audubon magazine. He was actually one of the founders of the Audubon Society, the original members. And this was his idea that came about in about 1900. So instead of having a side hunt, Chapman proposed that readers simply go out and look at birds. So spend a portion of each day on Christmas and sending a report of their hunt to Bird Lore before they retired that night. And so that's what they did. On December 25th, 1900, 27 people in 25 locations, spread mostly on the East Coast, but as far out, I think there was one on the West Coast, a couple in Canada, did 25 counts and recorded a total of 90 species. And that was it. Ever since then, this has been going on, every single year. Now the actual methodology took some time to kind of standardize. It wasn't really until the mid-1960s that Christmas bird counts developed their standardized methods that they use today. But in one form or another, a Christmas bird count happened and was published usually in Bird Lore every year. So this is what data collection looks like now. It's a 15 diameter count circle. There's about 56 of them in North Carolina. I'm just using Delaware here because they don't want to slide. And you can see that you have this series of non-overlapping circles within which every bird gets counted within a 24-hour window. Or at least that's the. So people pick a day within that December 14 to January 5th window of time, and they go out and count everything they can. Usually those circles are divided into sectors, and then there's people who are assigned to certain sectors or certain sites that sort of coordinate all the observers within that area. And when you're doing data collection, it's not just numbers of birds. Weather is also noted very in a lot of detail. And then the number of party hours, which is the number of hours that each group spends out in the field, and the number of miles they cover. Not only the miles they cover, but the type of miles they cover. So if you're driving and you're looking at birds, you record that separately as if you're walking and looking at birds, because there's two different ways to, you're going to miss a lot of birds if you're driving in a car, but you should still be counting the birds there. And if it's funny, if you go and enter data for a CBC, you'll see all of these different options for vehicles that you can use to count birds. A golf cart is on there, snowmobile is on there. It just gives you an idea of how much territory and how diverse these different counts can be. If you're in Alaska, you're just going to be cruising around in a snowmobile and counting like the 3 common ravens that you see all day. In the 4 hours of daylight that you have. Other than that, for here in Raleigh, we use car and foot mostly, but there is one team that's been using a kayak out on Lake Benson every year, and they're actually one of the main reasons we get anywhere close to 100 species every year. And there's also this thing called the count week, and I want to be clear about what this is, because if you're doing the count or if you've done the count before, you'll hear me talk about it. Count week, I view it as sort of a way to unofficially pad your species list, because you're like, I still have count day, but at least it's like a consolation prize, right? Count week is the 3 days before and after your count day. So if you see a bird when you're scouting, or if you see a bird after, like, I wish I got to the Christmas count. Hey, it's count week. Great. Okay. We got an evening grosbeak on count week about 4 years ago. First evening grosbeak we'd had since the 90s. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely going on our list, right? Because you really want to get that on there. But it just gives you a little bit better idea of what's around. So if you miss it, it's not like it's not there. You just missed it. We're doing a pretty good job in recent years of not missing any really common species, but this is a way to get it on your list if you, for some reason, somebody missed something. But the main things in data collection are consistency and coverage. These are what's really prized. So the most valuable CBC data are from circles that are covered in a consistent way every year. So the same sites every year, the same observers every year, the same amount of effort roughly every year. Of course, they have ways to control for that variation, but consistency and full coverage of the circle are really the key metrics that distinguish a really quality CBC data set from other ones. And what are these data used for? Well, there's a couple of broad scale conservation initiatives like the IUCN Red List that uses Christmas count data. The State of the Birds report published by the North American Bird Conservation Initiative annually, very influential document that also draws heavily on CBC data. And for some species, like Harris's sparrow is a good example. These are birds that breed really far north, and there's not, a lot of their habitat where they breed is not very easy to access. And so there's not a lot of people doing breeding surveys for things like Harris's sparrows. So Christmas bird count data is probably the single best source of information we have for how those populations have been doing over time. Wanted to briefly mention that my computer isn't working. There we go. That there is another big data set that is intended to complement the Christmas count, and that's the breeding bird survey. I don't know if any of you do breeding bird survey routes. You know what? It's
The cable's loose.
cables loose. What does that mean?
Because of attachments.
You know what? This thing is like, has all kinds of bare, this is a really old computer.
Is it done?
Yeah, this is my wire's all frayed. Don't touch that. It'll get electrocuted. So yeah, this other big data set is the, oh my God, really? What is happening? Sorry, guys. Let's try to, is this my computer or is it your computer? Maybe if I don't move.
It's something with the screen connection, because it's not flashing on mine.
It's not? Okay. Okay. All right. Nobody breathe. The Green Book survey is this car-based survey, 24.5 mile route, stops every half mile, and you stop and get out of your car for 3 minutes and you count everything you see here. It's been run since the 60s by USGS, and that's just a map of all the Green Book survey routes that cover the country. And it is the other big citizen science data set that is used in conjunction with the Christmas count to get broad scale pictures of what's happening with bird populations. I feel like this is not my computer.
I think it's something with the screens and stuff.
Okay. So just want to run through a little bit of just a couple summaries of a couple papers that have come out using Christmas count data. Whoa. Enjoy the show. Okay. It's not flashing on my screen either, so. Yeah.
There are people that are loose, let me go home.
We're going down. All right, well, I'm gonna keep talking. You between flashes, you just gotta see what's going on here. This is a paper that came out about 5 years ago. I thought was pretty interesting. It is basically using advances in analytical capabilities to look at CBC trend data in finer and finer detail. So the traditional way to do it, the traditional way that CBC data are analyzed looks like the graph on the right. Those where they basically carve up North America into what these bird conservation regions. You can see that the Piedmont is one of those regions when it comes back on. Yeah. And so what this is showing is that for American robins, they are increasing in the north and decreasing in the southern part of the range. So what they call a poleward shift. Species are generally wintering further north than they used to. That is a very common pattern that's seen in a lot of species, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And this doesn't show it particularly well, especially when it's flat. But on the left is a, yeah, okay, hold on a second. It's doing it over there too. But everybody at home is just seeing this not flashing, right?
It looks fine.
It looks fine on Zoom? Yeah, all right.
Let's all go home.
Everybody, okay. So on the left here, this map shows the actual pattern in a lot finer detail. What it's showing here is that yes, robins are increasing, but it's showing it at a much finer scale of resolution. So if you were, like I said, this is it's actually sort of a lot better on my screen than up here. Not because of the flashes, but what's happening is that robins are shifting north, but they're also shifting higher in elevation and they're shifting away from the coasts. Not only that, but areas with a history of high human populations are seeing robin increases faster than other areas. So there's a lot of local factors at play when it comes to these big range shifts. So it's not just like this big, very broad brush picture on the left where you see that conservation region showing a lot of increase and then everything else with these moderate levels of decrease. It's actually a much more complicated picture. The study used over 36 million observations of robins, 78,000 counts, over 3,000 count circles, and 52 years of data. Now that is a huge amount of data. And so when you talk about the value of these long citizen science initiatives like the Christmas bird count, this is where the real value lies, is that, yes, there's a lot of noise in these kind of data sets, but there's a huge amount of data, and so it's really useful for picking out the kind of signal that you just couldn't get with a much shorter term survey. Okay, I'm gonna switch up those pieces.
We're gonna try and switch out the screen.
Okay, should I pause?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or anything?
I'm connected.
This is a good time.
I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
Since you said they're shifting north, do you think that's because of the warming climate?
Yes.
Can I help with these?
In a word, yes, but you should, well, you know what? I'm not gonna spoil the surprise, because my next slide shows something related to that.
Why are they moving away from the coast?
No idea. And they're just moving, you know, that, I mean, this is particularly in the west, you can see this happening. They're going up in elevation to areas where they didn't used to be. So probably because there's food there. That's my guess.
Where people are.
My guess is that being robins, they like ornamental fruits and people planting ornamental plants that robins like to eat are influencing it. And that the next study I'm going to show you, I think sort of corroborates that.
You might see if there are any questions in the chat.
Oh, am I doing the shot? I'm sorry, I've been ignoring the Zoomers.
And you could repeat somebody's question, the audience can.
Good. Thank you for reminding me of that.
I can double check, man.
Yeah. So for those at home, in case you didn't hear, I was asked why they're moving away from the coast. I have no idea. They are moving higher in elevation, and the one question I got was why they're moving closer to humans, and I think that has a lot to do with why that humans have planted these ornamental plants that the robins like to eat. And as far as wintering further north, I think that's a very common pattern overall, just related to warming climate and probably increased food availability.
So.
Now-
Yeah, did you jump into it?
Yes.
Don't whisper. No, yeah.
No, okay.
Sorry, I gotta put this on a thumb drive. Should I? Let's start the screen shares. America. So in some cases, birds were shifting north in the Mississippi Valley, for instance, but they're shifting south in the Atlantic Flyway. So there's a lot of different things going on here. And this graph here at the bottom is essentially showing how much synchrony there is in trends between the two different flyways. And what you see is that it's sort of all over the map. Yes, there is a broad shift to the north, but all of those dark circles there show that there really wasn't a lot there wasn't much correlation between how birds were shifting in their ranges in the western part of their range in eastern North America versus the eastern part. American robins, speaking of robins, they actually excluded from this paper because they found that robins are increasing at some crazy amount, like something like 20 kilometers a year over 40 years, which is about 8 times the average shift that they saw in all the other birds. So they pulled robins out of that data set. Makes you wonder about the other paper, but I think it's still pretty interesting. It makes probably more likely they chose robins simply because they were doing that they had such a very obvious pattern. But there was a really interesting thing that they pulled out of all this data, which is that diet and migration strategy were both correlated with range shifts. And they sort of interacted in the sense that among migrants, short distance migrants, birds that shifted north that had more insects in their diet shifted less than birds that had more of a mixed diet. So here I'm using the examples of golden crowned kinglet, which what they call the latitudinal center of abundance, not their actual northern limit, but the center of abundance shifted northward only by about 20 kilometers over 40 years, whereas bluebirds shifted by about 10 times that. And that is, they correlated that in other such comparisons with bluebirds having a more diverse diet and able to take advantage of other food sources, including fruit. But the opposite was the case with resident birds. So resident birds that ate a lot of insects like Carolina wren had huge range shifts to the north, whereas birds that didn't have as much of an insect-based diet shifted less as well. So here, two very familiar birds, cardinal Carolina wren, about a 5-fold difference in the shift northward between those two species. So this was the first study, I think, to really demonstrate these kinds of interactions, and it generates a lot of questions as to how species are reacting to climate change and what is driving the range shifts that we see in the CBC data. But it also shows that CBC data are not showing this uniform, push northward by a whole lot of species. In fact, some species that ate a lot of fruit, like mockingbirds and catbirds, shifted almost really not at all, or even shifted to the south more than other birds did. So it's a pretty interesting paper. You should check it out. It's in the Journal of Ornithology from last year. So in summary, just to summarize the science before I move on more to the specifics of the Raleigh count, this CBC really is a really outstanding data source. It has a huge scale, it's long-term, and it has a lot of structure, right? Because that 15-mile diameter count circle is a very standard sampling unit. It allows all kinds of analyses to be done, including, like somebody mentioned, Cornell and eBird. eBird data in the stats and trends maps, yes, it draws an eBird data, but eBird and the CBC are not mutually exclusive, right? So this kind of data that they get over these broad spatial scales can inform these kinds of trends, trend estimates, and be able to enable you to generate really nice maps like this that were really not possible not that long ago. And of course, we need to keep doing this because we need to continue this tradition and really get a longer term picture. Okay, I'm going to move to the Raleigh count now. We've had 87 years of the Raleigh count. It's been running continuously, as far as I know. There's been, if you look in the Audubon database, it's a little questionable when you get too far back. There's a sort of an anomalous count from 1916 that I couldn't really get a lot of details on, and another one from 1928, I believe. But starting in 1937, this was when the count really took on its present form, and it's been run, as far as I know, every year since then. I went to the chat archive and I looked up the January 1938 issue of the chat, and I found a description of results of the Raleigh Christmas count, which they sort of left it ambiguous as to whether it was really the first one. But what they surveyed was a triangular area, mostly in and south of Raleigh, about 5 miles from east to west, 3 miles from north to south. It included places that we know, like Lake Johnson, like Raleigh, Pullen Park, but also a couple of places that are gone. Boone's Pond was one of them, and a place called Boneyard Lake. And through talking to John and Harry, I was able to find out that Boneyard Lake was an area along what is now Walnut Creek, and it was an open, it's either a open marshy area, or it's been built up, but it bears no resemblance to a lake nowadays. And I think the name hasn't been used in many years. That count had 6 observers, including C.S. Brimley, one of our founders of the museum. And they went out in 2 parties and they tallied 60 species. And they had some pretty interesting birds. They had long-tailed duck, which, as far as I know, has only been seen on the Raleigh count maybe 2 or 3 times. They had common goldeneye, which apparently used to be more common around here than it is now in the winter. And they have bobwhite, which I'll talk about more in a second. This is the Raleigh CBC now. Here's the circle. Thank you to Harry for sending me this graphic. The center of the Raleigh circle is centered right near the farmers market, right by Lake Wheeler Road and Centennial Boulevard. And as I understand, it was drawn specifically to include all of Lake Benson. So the southern edge of the circle essentially goes right across the dam at Lake Benson. So conveniently kind of gets the whole lake circle, which is great because we need the ducks. And then it includes a chunk of Umstead, and then, some of the bigger classic lakes like Johnson, Lake Raleigh, Shelley Lake, Lake Wheeler, Shade Forest and Prairie Ridge, of course. And also there's a lot of greenways that are in that area. It includes all of Raleigh inside the Beltline. About a mile north of the northern border, the Falls Lake Circle starts. So, there's also a Christmas count that's run just to the north, centered in Falls Lake. That one goes a little later in the count period than we do. For the past 5 years, we've had about 75 people join the count. So the participation has really increased over the years, and the number of species, broadly speaking, has increased as well. 100 species is always our target, and we've averaged about 100 species for each of the last 5 years. We're usually at 100, give or take 3. So 100 is always the target we're trying to get to, and we've done pretty good. And that's in part due to the fact that we have a very loyal and very enthusiastic group of participants who are covering some of those areas routinely. We also do some city parks, Dick's Park, the Art Museum Park, and Fred Fletcher Park are the real key ones that we try to hit every year. And then, of course, we have feeder watchers. And for things like Baltimore Orioles, hummingbirds, things that only come to feeders or are much more likely to be seen at feeders, feeder watchers are really critical for getting those species on our list every year. This list has been the same at least since the 60s. I'm sorry, not this list. This circle has been the same at least since the 60s. Once in a while, circles shift. I know the Roanoke Rapids circle shifted a little bit. For some reason, I did the Roanoke Rapids count a couple times. And it was a little confusing to know where the edges of the circle were, but by and large, Raleigh's stayed very stable over the years. I found this old map from 1951. It's a little hard to read, but you don't need to really look too much in detail. But the key thing here is that Raleigh has grown a lot. It turns out that Raleigh in 1951 wasn't very big, and so where I live now, which is like right over here, was almost looked like it was in the wilderness back then. Here's Lake Johnson down here, here's Lake Raleigh, so all of this area, and I'm assured that the area that is now Centennial Campus used to be sparrow fields. It used to be just really, really, really great habitat, open fields. There used to be a lot of wetlands that were managed for waterfowl, and that Boone's Pond area is right there, and that was also called Lake Boone. And this is Lake Boone Trail that runs along it. This is Glenwood right here, this thick line. So Lake Boone, of course, is long gone. It's all houses now. But Harry was telling me that he used to go birding there when he was a kid, and there were willows there. And so apparently this is the Boone's Pond, the first CBC survey way back when. So of course now there's crossroads, there's the Beltline, there's development pretty much all through here. It's a very, very different landscape than it was. It really gives you. I wish I had a lot more time to find maps like this and to look and see how much things have changed, just in terms of the landscape around Raleigh and the habitats around Raleigh. But I just thought I'd throw this one up here because this makes you think about some things. So how have the birds changed? One of the really striking patterns that I've seen just browsing through the historical data set is bobwhite. Bobwhites used to be really common here, and they are gone. Up from the beginning of the count up until the late, especially in the 70s, you get up to 190 bobwhites on the count. And when I scrolled through the data, and by the way, all this data is online. You can download it, you can look at it from year to year. There were good numbers of bobwhites, in the dozens through the 80s. And in 1989, there were 45. In 1990, there were 0. And from 1990 to 2007, there were only 4 years of recorded bobwhite. The high was 11, and there haven't been a single one since 2007. So, and it was really striking to me just to see this decades of bobwhite every single year, double and triple digit numbers, and then just between 1989 and 1990, something happened, and they're gone. Very, very interesting pattern, and probably the most striking pattern for any single species that I saw looking through all this data. Waterfowl. This isn't really so much a duck story as it is a grass carp and hydrilla story. There used to be a lot of hydrilla in those big lakes, and waterfowl fed on it. And so, of course, hydrilla, highly invasive. And when you have an invasive species, what do? You introduce another invasive species to control it, right? So the grass carp did a great job. They ate all the hydrilla, and they also ate everything else. And so now there's no food for the waterfowl, and the numbers really plummeted. I think that part of the reason we're seeing fewer waterfowl too has to do with later and later freezes up north. I found that in years where we have, a very warm winter leading up to the count, the waterfowl just don't migrate as early as they used to. We'll see how it goes this year. There was a lot of weather up north not too long ago that might have driven some down. I haven't been following too much what's going on, in eastern North Carolina, how the numbers are looking out there. But waterfowl numbers are certainly far lower, and I think there's less diversity than there was back, several decades ago. Right now, Lake Benson is really our key spot for waterfowl, and it's largely because Brian and Kyle Kittleberger go out on a kayak, starting at 4 a.m. and paddle the whole lake and try to count as many ducks as they can. And they are responsible for most of the waterfowl that we get nowadays. Certainly most of the dabbling ducks. Bewick's Wren, this is what I was wondering about. Bewick's Wrens used to be in Raleigh. Last reported Bewick's Wren on the Christmas count was in 1969. That followed a couple of decades of no Bewick's Wrens. So, there were a few, I think in the early 50s, there might have been a couple Bewick's Wrens reported. Bewick's Wren, mostly a Western species, but has largely disappeared from the eastern US for the most part. In fact, I'm not sure they even exist anymore. But Bewick's Wrens used to be here and no longer are. I think that's the only species that's really totally blinked out from the entire region that used to be recorded on Christmas counts here. Screech owls. This is like my holy grail, is finding a screech owl in the Christmas count. I always urge people to go find a screech owl because I'm always looking at the eBird map and I'm seeing that there's a screech owl out on the Neuse River Greenway just outside the circle. There's a screech owl down in southwest Wake County, way outside the circle. Where are the rest of the species? Maybe I shouldn't be baffled. There's a lot of barred owls here. There's a lot of great horned owls here. Maybe they're just hiding. But we have not had a screech owl on the count in many years. And I would love to know where they are. Maybe they're just not here anymore, but they used to be. There used to be quite a few. So if any of you are participating in the count this year and want to get up before dawn and try to find a screech owl, please do. I will be very happy to get another one on the count. Eruption year. So evening grosbeak, another holy grail of mine. I love evening grosbeaks. I never see them anymore. We had one, like I mentioned earlier, about 4 years ago. We had one count week. So I think it showed up like the day after the count. I'm recalling correctly, there were quite a few southern evening grosbeak reports. Normally, of course, they stay much further north, but they used to be much more regular here. And evening grosbeaks undergo these eruptions related to food supply. So other species that do that include red-breasted nuthatch, pine siskin, purple finch. There are, looking broadly at the data, there are fewer and fewer of those what we call eruption years in the CBC data. Used to be, according to Harry, it was almost every other year there'd be an eruption of something, but that doesn't really happen anymore. It does happen. A few years ago, we had a huge count for purple finches, and this year actually looks to be pretty good for purple finches too. But evening grosbeaks, I would love to see evening grosbeaks in Raleigh, and so far doesn't seem to be in the cards. On the other hand, there are a few major increases we've seen. And one of them, of course, is house finch. House finch, historically a southwestern breeding species found in the desert, was sold as a cage bird on the East Coast, escaped from captivity in the 1940s in New York and on Long Island, and spread pretty explosively over the eastern US since then. There were no house finches on a CBC in Raleigh until 1970, when the first one was recorded. And then from 1972 on, they've been every year. Within a decade, there were over 100 house finches being reported on the count, and now we get several hundred every year. So huge increase in house finches over the last 50 years or so. What's next? Right? What I didn't mention for increases in gulls, seen huge increases in gulls because of the establishment of landfills. We've also, since beavers were reintroduced in Wake County, they've created a lot of wetland habitat that has benefited things like rainbow herons. We don't get many wood ducks, but I'd have to see what the numbers of wood duck look like for compared to what it used to be. Limkin, I think, is a strong contender for species that could in the relatively near future be found on Christmas count. So we did, I think last year was the first North Carolina Christmas count record for Limkin. They're breeding as far north, at least. Do they breed in North Carolina yet? Are there breeding records for Limkin? I can't remember if they're definitely in South Carolina. Georgia, okay. Limkin, I think, is, they eat snails, and the apple snails that they prefer are spreading north, and they're just following the snails. And Hingo was seen count week last year. I think Hingo is a strong contender as well for another addition to the Raleigh Christmas count list. So, there's a lot of things that could still show up, and a lot of things we probably haven't even thought of that might be showing up in the next 30 or 40 years. That is all I have. I wanted to thank everybody for coming and thank everybody for watching. Just to let you know, the 88th Raleigh Christmas count is a week from Saturday on December 21st. Contact me if you'd like to participate. There's my email, boshay2@gmail. I can also be found at my museum email, although I respond quicker to Gmail. My email you can look up on the website, I think, but it's brian.o'shea@naturalsciences.org. It's very easy. And again, thanks to John Connors and Harry for their long-term perspective on habitats and birds on the count. And happy to answer any questions. And if you think of something later, just feel free to email me about it. Thank you.
Question,
Yeah.
was it ever rescheduled for really, really, really bad weather, like an inch of ice?
I don't know. So there's a weird glitch. 2013, I was here in 2013.
Yeah.
I think I did the Christmas count in 2013, but last year I was trying to figure out how many Raleigh counts there have been. There's no data for 2013. It either had to do with, not my fault, I wasn't the compiler of that, right? But it might have had something to do with the trend, the adoption of a digital interface for entering the data. Something might have gotten lost. But the weird thing is that I do Prairie Ridge, or I was doing Prairie Ridge every year, and I don't have an entry for Prairie Ridge for that day. And so I'm really baffled as to what happened with that. And then there are a few other spots, especially in the 50s and 60s, there are some real there's some gaps that I
There
don't.
was some rough weather in the 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
There was.
So, yeah, I don't know. I know that when Tom Quay was doing the count, it was every year, very consistently. But I've had it snow at least twice on the count since I've lived here, which I thought was kind of odd. Not a lot of snow, but there was snow. We've had some horrible weather, but we've also had some really great weather. So, yeah. And that's the thing is that these counts, we do it no matter what the weather is. It's really hard to reschedule it because a lot of people do a lot of different counts. And so if you set a rain date and they've already committed to another count, it's really hard to, and of course the holidays too, right? So it's hard to, people have plans and stuff.
So if you want to do the count,
Uh,
do you have to go out with a group or can you just? do
No,
it from your own theater?
You can do it from your own theater. Yeah, very easy.
So would we need to contact you?
I would send you, so I send out a data form.
Okay.
There's two ways to do it. So if you use eBird, you can do an eBird list from your house or from wherever you go. And you either email me the list or you share it with me to my eBird account. And I will not accept the share, but I will look at the list and I'll put the numbers into the data, right? Because if I accept the share, it means I was with you, it goes into my eBird and I wasn't with you, so I don't accept the share. But I do look at the list and I just copy the numbers from your list. You can do it either way.
Can you tell us what your eBird?
Yes, yes, that's a good point. I would say that, like I said, if you want to participate, contact me because I need to know who's doing what and who's where. So that I know, where I can go, where I need coverage. So if you contact me, I can send you that info.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I just want to mention briefly, if you're a more advanced eBird user and you do trip reports in eBird, that's also a good way to do it. There's just a couple things you need to bear in mind, which is that when you do trip reports in eBird, it aggregates everything. So if you are covering an area and you have multiple lists, and this is especially pertinent to people covering areas with water, where there's a lot of water birds that are concentrated in one spot. You have to be very careful about double counting. because eBird will add up, you know, if you see a flock of cormorants, you count them. And then for some reason, you enter another checklist and you see that same flock of cormorants, you should enter them on your eBird list because you're trying to report everything you see. But if you do it as a trip report, it will double the number of cormorants because it will count all those as separate cormorants. That's something that you just need to be careful of when you're reporting numbers with trip reports. So, but otherwise trip reports are great, especially if you're moving around within the circle, because at the end of the day, when I submit the list, it's just the unit of sampling is the circle, right? So it doesn't matter where the birds are within the circle. I'm just submitting data for the entire circle. So, so if you're moving around the circle all day long, a trip report is a really efficient and easy way to aggregate all your numbers. And submit your data.
One thing about trip reports, though, it doesn't handle effort.
Yes, if you're doing trip report, yes, you have to tell me exactly how much, distance you covered, and how much time you spent. Yeah,
Driving and-
yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Comments that be visible.
Yes, and
Default to that visible.
a lot of people don't report species by car, and I think that's fine. Because, I mean, I'm driving and trying to write down birds at the same time, not safe, but I do it. It's just, it's easier just to kind of break up, just cut off the sampling effort, drive to the next spot, get out of the car and then keep birding. That's what I prefer people do. Birding by car is more, if you're out in a real rural area and you're driving a lot of roads, and you're looking, things like red-tailed hawks and birds that are kind of widely dispersed and highly visible, those are probably more efficiently counted by car than they are by foot, so. Yeah. Anything else?
I think we have time for maybe one more or so.
No.
And is there anything in the chat? I forgot to ask about.
Well, the folks say there was definitely a count in 2013
There was, okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
and
Somebody tell Autumn.
you only lost 2 people during our challenge.
Of course. Yeah, let's try to get over 100 participants this year. If we do, we'll get special mention. They make a list of the counts that get over 150 species, which I don't think we're gonna do. Although Wilmington does. Wilmington does every year. And I think Morehead City often does too. And by the way, the Wilmington count, because it was the Christmas count that got us the first white crowned pigeon record from North Carolina that was found during the Wilmington Christmas count last year. No, 2 years ago. But yeah, the Audubon does a list of counts that have over 150 species and a list of counts with over 100 participants. So it'd be great to get on that list. We did also, a couple years ago, we had the country's highest count of brown-headed nuthatch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Come on, that's lots.
Yep, there's some count in Maryland that totally smashed us last year on that, but yeah, for one glorious year, we had the country record for brown-headed nuthatch.
So for the rare birds,
Just remember, there's always more than one brown-headed nuthatch, okay?
for the rare
Pro
birds
tip.
that are seen, do you just trust that they really saw them, or do you have to have a photo evidence?
For what? For the rare birds? Yeah, photos are good. For really rare stuff, we're gonna want documentation. We got a blackpoll warbler, the first count, John Gerwin got a blackpoll warbler, in 2022 in Pullen Park. It's a place that we probably wouldn't have thought to go, but John just decided to stop in there and found a blackpoll and, fortunately got photos of it. I think that they would, because of the similarity to pine warbler, and pine warbler is pretty common, I think they might have had a hard time accepting the record, but.
Yeah, but it's John.
So, yeah, it was good to get the photos.
too. If it's for me,
So,
All right, well, thank you, Brian.
Sure.
This was fabulous. And I'm not sure what happened with the projectors today. I think actually our sound and our video and stuff worked out pretty
I
well.
mean, I'm using an 11-year-old laptop with exposed wiring.
I don't think it's, I
Something
don't think that's, but I could be wrong. But anyway, thank you for bearing with us all, and we'll see you in the new Christmas bird count and then in the new year. And reminder that we'll be meeting at a different time than our normal time next month. We'll meet on Saturday, January 18th, instead of at our Tuesday meeting time. So,
Quick announcement.
yes, go ahead.
So Wake Audubon was invited to decorate a tree at the governor's mansion this season. And so Ann and I are going out there on Thursday to decorate it. I think they said it's open to the usually public from the 14th to the 16th or something like that. There's a limited number of days. I was kind of surprised. And so I don't know what the other days, they're keeping the trees decorated for another week after that. So I don't know who gets to see it for the rest of the week. But we've decided to put a lot of bird feeders and homemade bird feeders and things like that on there. And so ours is almost exclusively bird related. So if you're wanting to go out, I think it's also a fundraiser for Western North Carolina. So if you wanted to go out there to the governor's mansion, I have a whole lot more information about when you're allowed to go, except that week, this weekend. So feel free to go out. And otherwise, we will make a point of getting pictures, and we have pictures available. But yes, if you're interested in going out to the governor's mansion this weekend to check it out, please do. There'll be other trees as well. I don't even know how many trees there are gonna be, so.
But ours will be the best.
But ours, yeah, it should be very clear. Anyway,
I
all
was
right.
gonna say, you remember a few years ago that the governor's wife, and I can't remember her name.
Christie.
Yeah, Christie spoke and, she's a birder and she spoke at our, and it was about, the, what they call chimney swips.
Oh,
We were dedicating that, yeah.
she's very interested in native species, so, yeah, good. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
All right.
Happy holidays.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. There's some refreshments in the back of the room. I think we got the chairs away like normal, but thank you all for joining us tonight.
I'm still holding.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to. So you don't remember, you just speak, but.